CCCC to review Seamus Flanagan challenge on Stephen Bennett versus Limerick, red card. That's from Test Case. And Verney's dog loves a bit of camera action on the show. He was just over your shoulder there a minute ago.
Yeah, just on the Bennett one, my understanding of that was that they had actually discussed it during the game. And you know the way you say, oh, when there's a yellow card thrown out, that they've dealt with or made a decision already. My understanding was that they had discussed it, and I believe now, my independent colleague Colin Keys was saying that what they discussed or what they talked about during the game is actually recorded now, and you can go back and listen to it or whatever. So I'm not sure if anything's going to come of that.
Yeah, Colin, how are things with you this morning?
Hi Shane, yeah, not too bad. Sorry, no, there's a small bit of trouble with the link again, but can you hear me now and stuff okay?
We can indeed. Coming through loud and clear. Colin, we were just talking about some of the tasty challenges that we're seeing last week in the Limerick against Waterford game. There was skin and hair flying. What did you make of all that? I mean, you were no, I suppose you weren't too shy when you were out there yourself, but what did you make of it?
Yeah, I suppose like looking at even all the other sports, like obviously rugby now is big at the moment, and even soccer, like the concussion issue is becoming a massive thing, and I suppose rightly so because of the long-term effects. And like I think they have tried to clamp down on it big time, the connection to the head, particularly like when people are going at speed and stuff. And like if you look at 2 incidents last week, I think the Flanagan one, like definitely, I know it probably looked worse in the replay. I don't think he really meant to line it up at the start, but at the same time, like it was quite reckless. So I do think that was definitely a red card. And Garrod Hagerty's one, I thought, no, it didn't really show a replay, but I thought that nearly could have been a straight red as well. You know, it was very, very heavy contact, and it seemed to kind of get him straight into the head as well. You can see by the reaction from the players. So look, I think to be fair to the players, I think the referees are going to have to come out really strong, Croke Park, and say either the challenge is completely banned, it's a straight red all the time, or they're going to still allow it. Because at the moment, like some people are getting away with it, like Flanagan got a yellow, a lot of fellas get a yellow for it, and then people give out them and they say it should be red, that everyone's going against Limerick. But I do think it should be a red card for the players' safety going forward, definitely.
There's a duty of care as well on the man giving the tackle. Like the same as rugby, like there's a duty of care. You tackle him and you make it as fair as possible or whatever. But some of those, yeah, Flanagan's one, I know the slow-mo definitely makes it look a bit worse. But at the end of the day, his shoulder was still there, and even his elbow was even slightly raised as well. And I suppose with Hegarty, when you're 6'5" and you're putting in a tackle on a guy who's 5'10", there is a duty of care on you to, if you're trying to hit that it's on the money. And a lot of the time, like listen, 6'5" and 5'10", if you meet straight on, it's going to be up around the head realistically. So I think there's a fair onus on the tackler as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like technically shoulders are supposed to be going the same direction, by the kind of letter of the law. And we heard about that maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, there was nothing about it. Like you get away a lot as long as you didn't hit a fella directly in the head. You'd get away with going in for a big hit, even from the full back line coming out trying to take a fella. You get away with it. Whereas they are really trying to clamp down on it now. And I think, as you said, like they are the dangerous tackles, the big collisions to the head. So I think definitely, but I would say from a player's point of view, it should be stronger from Croke Park and referees. They should come out very black and white and say, look, this isn't going to be allowed. Show them exactly what it is. This is a red card. This is a red card. And I think players won't be long clamping down on it then.
I'm going to go through some of the comments here. I find some of them quite interesting. Lads, lots of talk about Limerick being very competitive. The same starting 15 and same 5 subs the last 5 years. Cian Lynch laughing with the ref at half time. Is there really competition in their team? I'd say so. I mean, look, I don't think it's the same 15 and I don't think it's the same subs, because Richie English was always starting, then Mike Casey broke his way in, then Barry Nash broke his way in, Peter Casey was in and out for a little while and now he's become a mainstay. Cathal O'Neill is pushing. Maybe we'll see more of Colin Coughlin and Adam English as time goes on as well. I agree sort of broadly that it's a lot of the same players, but it's not all of the same players. There is sort of elements. There's elements of that that's fair, and there's elements of that I think is slightly exaggerated.
Yeah, the squad has changed quite a bit. We're only looking at a quote from Garrod Hegarty from last week where he was saying he has a picture of the 2018 All-Ireland squad in his house, I think, and he just said he looks at it every now and then and just sees how the panel has changed massively since then. And the personnel on the team has changed a bit as well. Probably something we need to talk about at some stage as well. It's like Declan Hanlon's going to be out for the guts of a month, and he could be back for the Cork game. But it's one thing putting Dan Morrissey in centre back, and Dan is a very, very solid player and will play that role and hold that role. But he's not a quarterback like Hannon. He's not going to score from 100 yards like Hannon. He's not going to go forward like Hannon. He's not going to deliver those really crisp kind of triangular passes to get them moving from defence. So his loss will definitely be felt. And it was felt the other day as well.
Yeah, Kylie does get rattled a good bit when things go against him. He's had a few rants after games now. Good to see some emotion from a successful manager, different to Stone Cold Jim Gavin or Brian Cody. If Galan had put away 2 goal chances, that result would have looked different. That is also true. Richard Hogan says Conor Brown in 2019 on Keane Lynch. That was the last time.
It's funny, Shane, he says that, and this was like, to me, this was the closest Limerick have come to being beaten. Really, because someone actually had the chances to beat them. They came close to being beaten last year, but I don't think a team had the chances to beat them like Waterford had. And look at it, Keane Lynch was kept very, very quiet on both occasions, that 2019 semi-final and again the other day. I don't this idea of Keane Lynch laughing with the referee going in at half time, I would not be reading one iota into that. Not one iota. That's just his, like the Sunday game always showed that picture of him and Finn having a right sneer on the bench while the picture has been taken before one of the All-Irelands. That's just the way he is. I wouldn't read a jot into that. And I'd expect to see a different player come Saturday night as well. He will be bouncing and mad for road after being quiet the other day.
Yeah, PWell74 says Limerick players are all the right age. No older players on the team. I mean, Declan Hannon's probably the oldest, and I'd say he's, 30?
Nicky Quaid would be older. Declan, I think, would be the oldest. Declan and Dan Morris would be the oldest outfield players, yeah.
Let's talk about Limerick against Clare. I think this is going to be a war. I mean, again, you know, like people keep saying, geez, Limerick can't be as bad again. I mean, that would suggest that other teams can't improve as well. I'd be shocked if Clare don't improve from the Tipperary performance. I'd be shocked if Tipperary don't improve from that performance as well. Both of them showed frailties or weaknesses or areas that the opposition can get a bit of mileage from. I expect all of the teams to improve really here. So this is going to be a war, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a war. It generally is when these two meet. I have to say, Shane, mistakes aside, first half mistakes aside, I was pretty impressed with Clare. And it was, realistically, it was the mistakes that was the difference between the two teams. They got a run on tip at a couple of different stages. They put up a big score, take the mistakes out of it. They would have conceded a hell of a lot less, obviously, too. They have to find a way to get Tony Kelly into the game. They have to need to be getting more out of Peter Duggan. Shane O'Donnell actually started really well in the first quarter and was on a lot of ball and was linking a lot of play. Probably faded thereafter. I thought, just from a plus point of view, I thought Adam Hogan did a really good job on forward. He was on that yellow, probably had to be taken off. But there were definitely plenty of pluses for them. And I definitely, it was just the mistakes at the end. It'll be interesting to see if Brian Lohan kept faith with Eamon Foodie for the second half. And I think that was, it was brave and bold kind of move, because a lot of people maybe would have expected him to come off. Will he keep faith with him? Will he keep faith with him again this weekend? I'm not so sure.
I think he definitely will. And you know why? Yeah, because Sean Flynn, I know I mentioned him already, but he was on Tipcast with myself and Shane Brophy yesterday, and he was talking about how good Foodie's puckouts were.
Yeah, long in particular as well, yeah.
And how it resulted in a lot of scores for Clare, certainly possessions high up the field. I think that's the reason he's in the team in the first place. I mean, should the ball have been given back to him for that goal? Like, yeah, fair enough. He should have been.
No, stop.
Yeah.
No.
Look, do you know what? I'm probably trying to play devil's advocate somewhat. I'm maybe not trying. I'm trying to give him an out a small bit here, because it was his championship debut. It was a tough one. The first goal that went in, that's a nasty one. It just drops between the defender and the goalie. And if anyone got a flick, it would have ended up, look, I just feel sorry for him with the way it panned out.
Big time.
But in a lot of ways, he was quite good. And I'm not saying Eibhear Quilligan doesn't deserve a chance as well. Like, he's obviously done a lot of good stuff for Clare, despite having the odd mistake himself. But I just feel a little bit sorry for Eamon Foodie, considering, that he did do a lot right, despite the fact that the ultimate nightmare for a goalie had just befallen him.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it was like, he bounced back very well in the second half, and even from, after the third goal, because he could have been spooked completely, in fairness. But I do think it's probably a 50-50 call in Lohan's mind. But the fact that he stood with Foodie at half time, I don't know if there's any conversations about whether he might be taken off or not, but he stayed with him. So it'll be interesting to see whether he sticks with him this weekend again, because had he taken him off at half time, that probably would have had, detrimental effects on his confidence for not just this year, but probably for, a decent chunk of time. But I have to say, I thought Clare were humming well at different stages the other day, even despite some of their big men not playing well. Aidan McCarthy looked really sharp. Mark Rogers was sharp at times. Maybe would have been disappointed with, a couple of shots that he had for points. But they'll have no fear of getting themselves up for what's coming this weekend. And funny enough, I don't necessarily think they need a win at the weekend. They need a really good performance, but I still think they can get out of Munster with 4 points. I did think if they beat Waterford and Cork, they'll get out of Munster.
But that's kind of, with the mindset that, look, everyone's going to beat Limerick. So even if you lose this, you just need to get more victories, across the other 4 teams, So I don't know, because
they won't be thinking like that. Don't get me wrong. They will not be thinking like that. They'll throw everything they have at Limerick like they did last year. And they caused Limerick more trouble than anybody did last year.
Yeah. When are you most likely to catch Limerick in the Munster round robin? Given the form over the last few years. It's in the last game, isn't it? Think last year, the draw, think in 2018, even though they weren't entirely true, they were hammered by Clare that day. Think of 2019, they put out a bit of a scratch team against Tipperary and were beaten. Generally, whoever's playing Limerick fourth on that form is probably at an advantage. So if you can beat them now, it guarantees that Limerick will be playing as hard as possible in the final game, which would actually be a double boost.
Oh, it'd be brilliant. It'd be brilliant,
But Clare, is it true to say that they have the most dynamic, classy forward line, but it's just everywhere backwards on the pitch? Then it's the problem. And they have David Fitzgerald to come back in the team, but is it in the backs basically where they're being caught? Are they being caught on the sideline? Tactically, did they leave themselves too exposed and John Conlon wasn't back far enough, ensuring that Jake Morris didn't have the run of the place? Was that part of the problem?
Yeah, and part of the problem there was Noel McGrath hitting a few points from distance early as well and making Conlon really think. And maybe the fact that David Fitzgerald wasn't in around the middle there, or wasn't maybe able to cover all the ground that he would, even up down around the flanks when he'd be there as well. They definitely won't be as exposed against Limerick anyway. And I just hope we get something like the Munster final last year. I hope we get one of those bruising affairs. There's probably a high likelihood of us sending off, isn't there? Realistically,
fingers crossed. I'm looking for some Limerick suspensions.
Will you stop? Will you? For Christ's sake, you're really clutching at straws now. But based on last weekend, there's going to be, all eyes are going to be on these kind of head high challenges, and obviously a couple of things that were missed when they played in the Munster final last year. But no, expect a really bruising affair. Expect the opposite of what happened when the two of them met in the same venue earlier on this year, also on Saturday night in the league. Clare, I'm not sure what Clare were at that night. Maybe didn't want to show their hand or whatever. I don't know. But
they were weren't they?
Yeah, they were terrible the same night. The fact that they have delivered a good championship display, they just threw in clangers in there as well. So I think, I think that's Limerick by a point or two after what could be a cracking game.
So in the Tipperary game, Tip scored 5 out of 6 goal chances, and I'm considering that ball that dropped short from Brian O'Mara that Jason Ford nearly flicked in as a goal chance. I don't know if he even counted as a goal chance. So Tip were very, very clinical with the chances that they had. Jake Morris, the way he's shaping up now with this season, if Tipperary go well, he's going to be humming nicely. Whereas Clare at the other end scored 3 of 7. And there were very good chances, an awful lot of them. They could have won this game. I don't come away from this thinking, geez, Tipper back. I always say Tipper back. But, I didn't come away from that game feeling really kind of thinking, wow, Tipper building towards something massive for this season. I think Tipper building, but I'm just still not sure for this season. But
it's
like,
so crucial to have the 2 points on the board, though. Still, you know what I mean? Like,
because Tip should improve from that, because they saw an awful lot of what went wrong for Tip, saw an awful lot of what went wrong for them. And how can they ensure that someone like Eamon Foodie doesn't do as much damage from the puck outs the next day? Do they have to adjust how they set up? And obviously, look, they'll be looking to take down Limerick in the next game out if they can at all. But anyway, in the third round. But David Fitzgerald, I'm imagining he's going to come in for Peter Duggan here. I think Duggan has been a very good puck out option, but it just really hasn't happened for him. If you take out a couple of the early games in the championship last year, he had a tough championship last year. I'd imagine it's going to be David Fitzgerald, and I'm even thinking, will Aaron Shanahan get a chance from the start? Because when he came in, like, he looks like he's in great physical shape. Tony Kelly, by the way,
doesn't start though, does he?
He generally doesn't, but maybe it's just because you know what you're going to come up against Limerick. You're not going to get lovely 50-50 ball bouncing in front of Ian Galvin and Mark Rogers and so on. And by the way, Rogers is class. But, like, are you going to have to sort of almost accept that we need someone really physical in there? If we're going to have to truck it long at times, we need Aaron Shanahan or Peter Duggan type figure in there. And it's a tough one for Galvin to have him starting in there also. So maybe we might try and use him off the bench.
Yeah, potentially so. Yeah, they had the options at least, Shane. They had different types, and like Duggan, a man scoring coming in off the bench would be a great option too, wouldn't it? For the last 15 or 20 minutes, because when he's in that type of mood, he's a wrecking ball. I just thought Tip had his number the other day, and even, you know, when he puts that long arm out to pick up the ball, they were kind of nearly playing his arm at times as well, very, very smartly, and he just couldn't get on the ball. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, as you say there, if he's left in reserve and comes on, and when they need kind of a bit of a physical force in that last 15 or 20 minutes. But like, the fact that Hannon's not playing does open up a few avenues and ways of potentially getting at Limerick. Will Kelly go out and play 11 and try and roam and try and pull Dan Morrissey out a small bit so they can create a bit of space inside for some of their nippier lads? Like, I would say, like, Will
O'Donoghue, you're convinced that Morrissey will be playing 6, yeah, because they don't want to put Kyle Hayes in there because it'll sort of decommission him as an attacking weapon.
Yeah, I think it robs Limerick of one of their most potent kind of weapons. They might put Hayes in 6 and put Dan Morrissey at 7. I don't think that.
Could you put Nash there?
The team as well.
Could you put Nash there and then put Richie English in the 4 position? Now, obviously, Richie English probably isn't going to attack with the same sort of threat as Nash, but Nash would be very much freed up to drive forward because he knows that there's always going to be a man back there.
Yeah, he's still not free to go forward from the position he usually would be going. I think they'll plug someone in at 6, and I think it'll be Morrissey, and they won't move. Like, because you have to, you know the way when you're making a switch, sometimes you end up making 3 or 4 switches. I think they'll just make one switch, and it'll be Dan Morrissey in at 6, and that'll be Mike Casey in at 3, and nobody else will move because it doesn't upset the balance of the team.
Yeah, so Porter says here, a lot of media say the Tip backs lack pace. How do you fix that? I don't think you can this season because Barry Heffernan's not there, Craig Morgan's not there. I'm not saying Paddy Cadell is a speed machine, but he's another guy who's able to move pretty well. And then Ger Brown being missing as well. That's a big absentees for Tipperary. Even Kieran Connolly, who we haven't even seen play championship action. And by the way, Tipperary had 5 championship debutants last week, which you know is not to be sneezed at either. Another question here: Ryan Taylor is so dangerous running with the ball. Needs to get his head up a little quicker though. I think he's such a good player. I mean, he was an all-star last year for me. I don't know if he's ever going to get the credit that he deserves. But when you mention, like, he wore 11, but he'd be around midfield, sort of moving up and down. But like, when you're talking about players that could hurt Limerick, I think based on his performances last year, he could. And I don't think he's afraid to run right up the centre where it's going to hurt. And all the more chance for Clare to profit from it if Declan Hannon isn't there.
He gets it. He sees a gap and he just goes through it. The afterburners go on. A lad is with him, and then all of a sudden Taylor is just kind of gone. He got a lovely score off the hurl in the early stages of the game. I think Limerick probably underperformed a bit around the middle of the park the other day as well. I wouldn't say Will O'Donoghue, he had a good game, but definitely not one of his better games for Limerick. And it was funny because Shane Dowling was saying on Friday night in Roemore that he would have been, you know, put out over Jamie Barron getting the All-Star over him a couple of years ago after dominating him in that All-Ireland final. But he didn't really get didn't really get the upper hand the other day, and there's a lot of things you just expect a lot of people to be a lot better on the Limerick side than they were last weekend.
Oh,
six-day turnaround as well, Shane, which is tricky too. You have to throw that into the mix as well. From a Limerick point of view, Waterford obviously have 7 days, and I know you're saying they're finely honed athletes, but 6 days is tough going. So they'll be having to get. I think they, from what I heard, was they were in the pool on Monday morning, and they were. I think they were supposed to train on Tuesday, but they ended up training on Monday instead. And I'd say there was a few home truths told.
So P-Well 74 is going for me here. You might read that out and tell me, is it justified?
Jesus, lads, 10 teams playing this weekend, and Tip isn't one of them. But there's but there's more talk about them. Yeah, well, to be fair, now the only thing I'll say about that is that's nothing new for the man on this side here.
Is that being fair? I don't know.
To be fair, you weren't here on Monday, so I wouldn't mind getting your 2 cents on Tip. But I think we have your 20 cents on Tip now, let alone your 2 cents.
Just like we've seen historically, Limerick aren't going to man mark lads, even if they're doing a bit of scoring. Like I suppose Ger Brown last year, don't like mentioning Tip. Tony Kelly in the past, they're not going to man mark them. They're not going to man mark him this weekend either. Like there's no question about it. They're not going to send a Cathal Barrett type character off after him. So he should get more opportunities to score here. The only thing is, I was hearing from Clare people after the game, of course, they were lining up their excuses, that he wasn't entirely fit for the game last weekend. Like, maybe that's one of those things that you often hear, but I don't know.
I've heard that a lot now. Like, I heard that after the All-Ireland semi-final last year as well. I heard definitely 2 or 3 times before that as well. So, I don't know. I can't. Yeah, I've heard that anytime he's underperformed, I've heard that after. I'll put it to you that way. And he's a class player, and I do expect him to be a good bit better this weekend. And he will get a bit more freedom. He won't be tagged like he was the other day. Have to just mention. I'll bring up Tip for a second here. Like Barrett is much maligned at times, particularly from people outside of Tipperary. He's a bit of a target for people. But I thought he did a super job the other day, and he's just I'm a big admirer of his on the pitch now, I have to say.
Who's going to man mark Cian Lynch? Is it going to be John Conlon? Are they going to make a different plan for him? Maybe David McInerney?
It won't be John Conlon. I wouldn't have said... Well, McInerney did a good job on Hegarty in last year's Munster final. I don't know if that's his type of role. One thing I have to say about Clare is as well, Dermot Ryan's a good shooter from distance, right? But they cannot shoot every time from 100 yards. It's debilitating when it doesn't go over. Yeah, but it's a killer. And when you have guys inside, particularly nippy lads, when you have an Aidan McCarthy that's lighting it up as well, it was a killer at times the other day. They need to be smarter on the ball. And it's one thing shooting when your feet are planted and you're totally in the front foot and composed, but there's some shots the other day that were rushed, and it's just, I just think they're undercutting themselves, and there's no need to be doing it. There's times to do it, and there's times not to do it. And from David McInerney's point of view as well, if I was him and I was his manager, I'd be getting him to play the ball in more and shooting a lot less.
I'd be telling him you're dropped if you keep shooting, because I'm looking early in the game, 6 or 7 minutes, David McInerney shot drop short, 7 minutes, Dermot Ryan wide. 9 minutes, Dermot Ryan wide. I mean, you're killing your team here. Stop shooting. You were in the backs because you were a back. Play the ball in. I would rather 3 balls go in low to Mark Rogers or whoever is in there, Shane O'Donnell, rather than Yeek scoring 1 from 3 or 2 from 3. I want the balls going in, because, I mean, for a defender, what's better than like knowing I'm isolated in space here and watching some back hitting a shot wide from? You're just like, oh, thank God, and everyone thinks you're playing well. Then all of a sudden, the corner forward's getting frustrated. He's getting whipped off, even though he's been, killed by his teammates out the field. So yeah.
Do you know what's worse, Shane, is that if you're playing cornerback or whatever, and your man has you beaten if the ball is played, and he knows he has you beaten, and he gets very frustrated when the ball doesn't come in. And you could see it in his body language. You could see it in some of their body language as well. And it's just a killer. And they'd stop making the run if they know the ball isn't going to come most of the time as well. So I think that's something they really need to iron out.
Yeah, early in the game, I thought Waterford were at it a little bit too much as well. I remember Connor Prunty, maybe Caleb Lyons, and there was one other player as well. Actually, I had it written down here. I'll just double check. Yeah, Ty DeBurka. They all had shots from distance, and you're like, fair enough, you can't get the ball in, but like, well, maybe that was the problem. They were struggling to get the ball inside to where Limerick had the numbers, so they felt that they had to shoot. But maybe then you need to pick your team slightly differently and get shooters out the field. Okay, so this weekend, how do you think that game is going to go if you were to put your neck on the line?
Yeah, I think Limerick will win. It'll be probably 2-3, I'd say. I think it'll be a real attritional battle again. I wouldn't understate the Hannon loss. I think he's a massive loss, but I still think they'll get the job done. I expect them to be up a few gears. Up plenty of gears from last weekend. Saying that, I expect Clare to find a few gears as well, and I think their attack could pose them trouble. If they're able to get, let's just say, of Mark Rogers, Shane O'Donnell, Tony Kelly, and Aidan McCarthy, if 2 of them are humming even, they're going to be well in the game. If 3 of them are humming, they have a great chance.
Yeah, there's part of me that thinks that Clare could actually shock the hurling world here.
Wouldn't it be brilliant for the championship if they did? Because then you have Limerick on 2, Clare on 2. Maybe you just say if Waterford won as well, that'd probably be the perfect scenario, because you'd have Waterford on 2, you'd have Tip on 2, Cork could win their second game and be on 2 as well. That's what we wanted. That's why, and I know we'll chat about Leinster in a minute, that's why Antrim getting points off Dublin was just like re-energized Leinster, because it opens it up, and we'll see what they can do against Wexford, and we'll chat about that in a minute. But you don't want that predictability. And listen, it's not predictable, because would you be surprised if Clare turned over Limerick at the weekend? Not one bit.